Hello everybody, this is Mr. McKeever here, and today we're going to talk about fascism. So hopefully at this point you have caught up on your videos, because you're going to need to know a little bit about the Great Depression and everything that led up to that to really understand what's going on right here. So when we talked about the Great Depression, we talked about the fact that some nations around the world decided to turn to fascism as their solution to the problems caused by the Great Depression. What we're going to do today is actually explain what fascism is, and particularly what nations take that route, and how is that significant to the setting up of World War II. But technically, first we need to define what fascism is. And many of you guys have probably heard about fascist, or the word fascism tossed around a lot in the news and the media today. So hopefully this will help clarify what some of that is. Alright, fascism itself is using extreme nationalism, combining it with ideas of totalitarianism, which is an extreme form of a dictatorship that's really pioneered by Stalin, who we'll learn about next class quite a bit more, in particularly his versions of totalitarianism. And then combining those two together to create a way of life that is extremely run by the state, and it really gets the people to do whatever it wants because of this extreme nationalism. So, definition is using nationalism to control all aspects of life in order to bring the state/nation to glory. So a brief little equation: nationalism plus totalitarianism equals fascism. This is really important. Understanding the definition of what fascism is really what allows you to be in the conversation as to Mussolini and Hitler and Tojo in Japan, and even why that's different than what Stalin does in the Soviet Union. So this is a fundamental piece of this conversation. Alright, so who really comes up with this idea? Well, the first real pioneer in fascism is Benito Mussolini. Benito Mussolini is a very interesting character in history. He comes from that line of really random jobs that you would not expect to radically change the world, much in the same vein as Mao, who was a librarian, while Benito Mussolini is a newspaper editor. And it is his very articulate background and his ability to smith words together that is going to help rally people to his cause. And for him, there's really two things that are going to be his things that he rallies the people because of. First is the Treaty of Versailles, because he believes that Italy was wronged by the treaty, particularly in the fact that they were on the winning side but really received no actual rewards for being on the winning side. He's completely glossing over the fact that Italy switched sides during the war and probably did well enough to just avoid punishment, but that's neither here nor there. And then the other thing that he has an issue with is the economic troubles in Italy that are a product of the Great Depression. Italy is not immune from the issues of the hyperinflation in Germany and the economic ruin that is in France and England and various other places of the world. So he uses those two issues to rally people to his cause. And once he starts to have a following, they will call him Il Duce, the leader, and everything begins to fall in his lap. So these are some interesting quotes from Mussolini. Inactivity is death. It is humiliating to remain with our hands folded while others write history. It matters little who wins. To make a people great, it is necessary to send them into battle, even if you have to kick them in the pants. And that is what I shall do. But my personal favorite: let us have a dagger between our teeth, a bomb in our hands, and infinite scorn in our hearts. And this just gives you a little bit of the mentality that Mussolini has when he's rallying people to his cause in Italy. So using phrases like this and that hatred of the treaty and the feeling of being wronged by the European powers, he's able to amass a pretty substantial following. And by October of 1922, you had 30,000 people marching with him to Rome, to the palace of the King Victor Emmanuel III, and demanding that he be placed in charge of the Italian government. And as pretty much anyone in the world who has 30,000 angry people march to the front door would do, he says, "Okay, I agree." And once Mussolini is in control, he starts remolding Italy into his fascist state. And that first step for him is the creation of his black shirts. A common theme in totalitarian regimes is the creation of a police force that is loyal to the individual, the actual ruler themselves. And Mussolini does exactly that. His police force is going to be at every street corner. If there is an opposition to what he says or what he demands, that police force will quiet that opposition. It was the only voice of the Italian people, and it will control pretty much everything for the Italian people. Mussolini will make a lot of other changes to Italy itself too. Many of them are actually disasters for the Italian people. Particularly, all of his economic planning blows up in his face and will actually lead to mass starvations across the country and really relegate it in World War II to being a minor power, because they are so embattled in their own economic issues that they can't really help the war effort all that much. But we'll talk about that a little bit later. Let's go to our other fascist dictator, and that is in Germany. Well, you guys know who this is before I really go into it. What I'm going to try to tell you guys is the backstory as to why he became the man that he eventually infamously became. So the story begins with a young child named Adolphus Schicklgruber, born in Branau, Austria, to Alois Schicklgruber and their kitchen maid Clara. Aloy was married prior, but he divorced his wife and married his kitchen maid, who also happened to be his second cousin, which means it is the child of a first cousin. So we have some interesting family lines here. He is raised Catholic by Aloy and Clara and was actually a choir boy who sang. And for all intents and purposes, to what we understand, he had a very wonderful singing voice. So that is his backstory. It totally sounds like a guy who's going to lead to the death of millions of people, right? Yeah. Well, part of the problem comes in his upbringing. Early on in Aloy's life as a father, he is a little bit harsh of a disciplinarian, much like most German parents during this time were. And it was German custom during this time that a father is the sole arbiter of discipline in the household. If a child did something wrong, dad was going to punish you for it. Well, Clara, mom, didn't really like this, and she would hide Adolphus from dad so he couldn't punish the child, literally in cabinets or closets or wherever he could, to avoid Adolphus having to face repercussions for his actions. And because of this, he never really has to face those repercussions. He never fully understands the idea that his actions have consequences. And this is going to also lead to him being picked on as a small child, because it becomes pretty common knowledge in the town that they lived that mom protected him. Mom raised him as a Mutterschonchen, which is a mama's boy. And that is terrible for a child during those early stages of growing up. He is going to be ridiculed pretty mercilessly by his classmates because of this. Well, he deals with the ridicule by becoming an art student. As aspiring art student, applies to art school and is not let in. And the sponsor for him going to art school was his uncle, who happened to be Jewish. I believe 1/8 Jewish. And this is going to become a pretty significant event in his life, because after that he joins the German army and volunteers in World War I. And while he is in World War I, he wins 2 Iron Crosses for courage, or is awarded 2 Iron Crosses for courage, including being injured in the line of battle, and actually spends time convalescing in a hospital for, I believe, 6 weeks before going back to the line again, and then eventually the war itself ends. So after all this has taken place, after his failed art career, eventually Adolphus will meet up with a friend of his named Drexler, and they will create the German Workers' Party. And this German Workers' Party is a small, aspiring political union that is outraged at the terms of the Treaty of Versailles, and doesn't really gain a lot of following until they change the German Workers' Party name to the National Socialist German Workers' Party, which they'll call the Nazis instead. And for this Nazi party, they do create a symbol for it, as you can see on the screen right now. It is the swastika that has become iconic to the Nazis. They didn't create something new, though. They took a very old symbol, one that stood for peace, and they turned it about 45 degrees and made it the symbol of hate and intolerance that is known around the world for today. Well, what did they do once they built the party? They created this name. They did all that. Well, they went around and they went to beer halls in Germany to spread their message. The message that Germany was being betrayed by their government, the Weimar Republic. The Treaty of Versailles was a disaster, and that Germany needed change. Well, during one of these beer hall meetings, a riot breaks out, and Hitler himself is actually thrown in jail for speaking out against the government for treason, inciting a riot. And while he is in jail, he writes himself a book called Mein Kampf. And Mein Kampf is My Struggles. And in there he has a few critical points that really should have made the rest of Europe aware of what his goals were, but, you know, for those people who didn't get it, well, what did it mean? Well, there's three parts. First, he really lays out his ideology of a master race. The Aryan people, which technically are descended from the Swedes and the Viking, the Norse people in Scandinavia, the blonde-haired, blue-eyed, Protestant, tall German, which he is none of, as he is a average height, black-haired, brown-eyed, Austrian Catholic. So there's a little bit of a contrast there that should be pretty alarming to people. And also today you should kind of make us aware that he kind of wanted the exact opposite of his own life. He also establishes the wrongs of the Treaty of Versailles in the Mein Kampf and describes how the treaty was administered by foreign nations and how we acquiesced when we shouldn't have, and it is all the fault of the treaty as to why Germany is struggling now. And he also states, and this is really should have been the alarm for the rest of Europe, that Germany needs Lebensraum, which is living space. Germany needs to grow. And for those who have any basic idea of geography, you would be aware that Germany is right in the center of Europe. So for Germany to grow, it has to take land from other places. And that should be the alarm. That should have been the oh crap moment where everyone's like, wait, what? But it isn't. Hitler is able to go back to his Nazi party and gets more and more support from the people. In fact, he garners enough support that the president of the Weimar Republic, a guy by the name of Hindenburg, who was an established war veteran, he was the man who was in charge of the German forces during World War I, and people generally loved him, is going to make Hitler the chancellor. The idea was that he can keep an eye on him as the chancellor, and the chancellor role had zero power. What unintentionally happened, at least unintentionally for Hindenburg, very intentionally for Hitler, is that shortly after becoming chancellor, his Nazi party becomes the dominant party in the German parliament. A series of elections takes place. They are probably rigged, and it gives a majority vote to the Nazis. The Nazis almost immediately begin passing laws that gives the chancellor more and more and more and more power. So now he's established in the government. Hindenburg's being, elbowed out. He doesn't have much control over things anymore because the parliament itself is being controlled by the Nazis. And things are spiraling out of control. And all we need now is that final piece that will allow Hitler to gain complete control. And it happens in the form of this. The burning of the Reichstag, the German parliament building. And mysteriously one night, the German parliament building bursts into flames. And when it bursts into flames, the next morning Hitler knows who did it. He is adamant he knows. It is the fault of communists. Communists were the ones who burned down the Reichstag. And he will go out of his way and he will hunt down all of the communists in Germany. What he needs is a police force to do that, and Germany gives him one. The SS. They will be Nazi-loyal police officers whose goal is to hunt down communists. But in reality, they will be Nazi-loyal police officers who will hunt down anyone who speaks out against Hitler. Most infamously, the Jews themselves. And this is when everything spirals out of control. The Nazi propaganda machine begins and everything radically changes in Europe. The SS becomes the predominant police force, and one of the first official state actions of this Nazi-controlled political party is declaring support for the Spanish Civil War. Totally didn't see that coming, did you? So wait, why do they want to declare support for the Spanish Civil War? Why does Hitler care about this? Well, let's explain. So Hitler up to this point has been consolidating power in Germany. He now has his police force, and one of his goals is very clearly to reestablish Germany as a significant political and military power in Europe. To do this, he needs to build himself an army, and he sees an opportunity. The opportunity comes when a conflict breaks out between the Republican government of Spain and an aspiring fascist named Francisco Franco. Hitler is looking for an opportunity, and his opportunity is to test out some new weapons that he's been playing around with back in Germany. So not only is Hitler really trying to, rebuild the German military, he's not trying to rebuild a World War I military though. What he wants is a new, modern, potentially World War II military. So what he does is he goes to Franco and says, "Hey pal, I'm going to help you out. I'm going to help you out by handing you a bunch of weapons that I just want you to use," because he wanted to have field tests of how they would work. And what these weapons were brand new tanks. We're called the Panzer tanks. Whereas World War I tanks traveled maybe 10 miles an hour, these traveled 30 to 40 miles an hour. They're also equipped with massive cannon artillery on them, which makes them incredibly devastating. He also introduces Stuka dive bombers. They're bombers that planes, drop bombs, not too special there, but they're jet engines, so they move significantly faster, and they also were equipped with these weird whistles. And the whistles were what made them iconic. These dive bombers would begin their dive towards their target, the air would blow into the whistles on the plane, and it would make this squeal like a banshee that was there to terrify the enemy. It was a weapon of fear, a weapon of terror. And they toy around with these weapons during the Spanish Civil War, and they're incredibly successful. Franco will become the new leader of Spain, and he effectively removes Spain from European affairs for the next 30 plus years. So, now that he has his war weapons, now that he has his police force, what he needs now is his right hand. He needs his secret police. That's kind of how the fascist system works. And he will get that right hand and that secret police from a guy named Heinrich Himmler. Himmler is the devil's right hand. He is going to be the leader of the Gestapo, the secret police force that the Nazis will create in order to exert their control over all of Germany. The SS wear uniforms. You're very clear to see who a member of the SS is, and they're loyal to the Nazi party, whereas the Gestapo wear plain clothes. They're everywhere. They could be your neighbor, they could be your uncle, they could be your brother. You would never know. And if you speak out against the government, it'll be the Gestapo that take you away and you are never heard of again. It'll be this group, led by Himmler, that'll be the ones that carry out the Holocaust itself. Hitler said that the Jews needed to be removed. They needed to leave. In fact, his original idea was to send them to Madagascar. It is Himmler that develops the concept of the Holocaust. It is Himmler that develops the concepts of Auschwitz, Dachau, Birkenau. Hitler is an idea guy. Himmler's a details guy. Once all of this begins to lay itself out there, once it becomes very apparent what's going on, it doesn't take long for things to become incredibly violent. It begins with the Kristallnacht, the night of broken glass, where Jewish homes and shops are raided and burned, and Jews themselves are attacked in the streets. And shortly after that, we see the movement of them to ghettos, from the ghettos to concentration camps, from concentration camps to the death camps. And the Holocaust begins to play itself out. There's a very interesting account. You can pause the video and read through this if you would like, but I'm just going to read you the very first line so you can get a perspective of this. This is from a letter recovered after Kristallnacht. You cannot imagine how things have been with us. Papa with a head wound, bandage, myself in bed with severe fits, everything devastated and destroyed. And the poor child had to look after us, cook, run errands, and although I'm still in a state of serious exhaustion, it has been nearly 14 days and I still cannot take it in. Yeah. The Holocaust is beginning. Germany has been rebuilt under this fascist regime, and everything is going exactly as Hitler and Himmler planned it. If you're interested in learning more about the Holocaust, and I know you guys have done a ton of it when it comes to English classes, a resource that unfortunately is not used often enough, in my opinion, is the story of Maus. Maus is actually a graphic novel that depicts what happened during the Holocaust, except the author, Art Spiegelman, had a hard time relating the stories of his dad, who is an Auschwitz survivor, to people. So for him, the only way to depict the situation was to depict them as animals. The Jews themselves are mice, the Germans are cats, the Poles are pigs, the Franks are frogs, and it lays out the story of how Art's father survived Kristallnacht and the ghettos, and then eventually the shipping to Auschwitz, and the story of not just that, but also what the impact was on his father and how it's still seen in his life 20-30 years later. It's a really cool tale. If you're interested in it, let me know. I do have a copy of it that I can lend out. It takes like an hour to read the entire thing. So, alright, you guys have a wonderful day. The dominoes are falling. World War II is on the brink, and everything is about to fall apart. Have a great day.